Hi, good afternoon. So as Melanie has probably already said, we started a campus development project last year, which was interrupted by school closure. So I'm going to sort of run through for you some of the steps that we've taken so far within the project and to bring you up to date. So going back to last year, we had a few guiding questions to the study. To what extent is outdoor space providing for the different needs of the community? And to what extent is outdoor space fulfilling the guiding statements? But we had, in developing a kind of methodology and an aim for the study, we had some focus questions. We were interested in what types of play and interaction is observed at playtime and breaks across both primary and secondary. We were interested in what the role of this play was and what play has most sustained engagement. So what types of play and how kind of effective is that play? How engaged are students in that? We were interested also in spatial patterns of movement, so play, interaction, movement across outdoor space. And we were looking to see whether we were maximizing the use and benefits of that outdoor space. So, for example, we would consider nature or the use of playgrounds and the use of those kind of movements across campus. And then finally, there was a biodiversity element. So how healthy is natural space and to what extent does it fulfill a role for nature? And more importantly, I think for us as a school community, our children's relationship with nature. So last year we developed there was a sort of I'll go through a kind of sequence here of what we were looking at. First of all, I needed to establish a working group, a student group. And so I presented the project in assemblies. And then from that, we had a good group of students across years 9 and up to year 12. And we met regularly at lunchtimes each week. And our main focus was to establish the aims, which we've kind of gone through already. Use of space, types of play interaction, and the health of nature. And from that, we spent a lot of our time designing a methodology around how we were going to observe this play and the use of break times. We thought about using film and camera, as well as drone technology. And we put together quite a comprehensive survey for students at the secondary level initially. We also conducted some interviews, and so some colleagues in primary, Sarah and James, conducted interviews with their students to see what their thoughts were around play. And we looked at ways that we could integrate it into the curriculum. So as I said, we were disrupted last year. School closure kind of brought the project to a halt. So we started again this year, and luckily we were able to establish it as a CAS group with the senior students. So we have a working group there on a Wednesday afternoon. And I also run an enrichment group called the Forest Club, so we'll be able to integrate it into that project too. We've been quite busy. We've reworked the methodology, we've adapted the surveys, we've developed a primary targeted survey as well. We've tested drone footage to see how we can do that without distracting play. And we've made contact with key teachers to see how it can be linked into ILTs. We've also started observations. So you might have seen us outside, students on Wednesday afternoons and at different breaks and lunch times. We're observing play. We've filmed some play. We've sent out surveys to secondary and I think planning to this week with primary. And the curriculum aspects are with team leaders at the moment. So what sort of things were we looking at? Well, what types of play and interaction were observed at break time? So this involved us going outside, observing playgrounds, and we were looking specifically at patterns of play, types of play, and differences within the groups. So this here represented that lovely green space which students were using at the start of the year when we had that segregated play set up. And we did observe there that children did interact with nature. They liked digging, they liked interacting with the trees. There was also a lot of locomotive play, movement, and movement for the sake. And that seemed to be really mixed across genders. There was also a lot of social interaction, especially with girls, sitting in the shade, talking, but also playing games and interacting with nature in different ways in that space. This in particular seemed a very successful use of space, and there seemed to be a lot of diverse activity and play and interaction in that area. That wasn't the case, we felt, in that space between Brel and Jacques Rogge, which is predominantly concrete and offered students kind of very little in terms of interaction. So we have at this point kind of made some tentative conclusions in terms of what types of play we're observing. So in primary, a very dominant type of play is locomotive play. This is kind of movement for movement's sake. There's lots of physical play, strength games, and they're different. That we see differences between boys' strength games and girls' strength games. Sport is still very present. We have quite a bit of low energy social interaction that goes on. But we also observe deep play. This is kind of fantasy world. This is role play, and that often integrates with locomotive play. We see a lot of organized games, so we've seen skipping, we've seen stilts. There's all sorts of things available at upper primary that seem to be very successfully integrated. And then in lower primary, we've seen the success of ramshackle play, this idea that children play with objects that are more abstract, and that creates more imaginative play, but also a very diverse range of play has been observed there. In secondary, we've got high energy, high engagement sport, low energy, low engagement sport, lots of physical strength games, and of course lots of social interaction in groups, and very, very important to observe kind of differences between boys and girls in secondary. So patterns of play and interaction. So the sort of things that we were looking at here really were to do with how well used spaces are and what spaces are underused. What types of activities are kind of dominant? They perhaps lead to a territorial behavior on playgrounds for perhaps very good reasons, actually. And then what differences can be observed across gender or age groups? And we're very much interested in levels of segregation. This might be very planned. So a sport, for example, cricket, requires its own space. And so by the nature of that play, it's very, very set, isn't it, in terms of segregated space. But other times we're seeing play, locomotive play, for example, is very dynamic. What type of space does that occupy? And what are the flows and movements of students within that? And we're very interested in kind of the causes of these segregations. And of course, we might also be able to observe through here the causes of tensions in the playground. So this is kind of a tentative map of kind of play. This is the football field and a primary playground. We see predominantly sport and football kind of segregated out here. Very large locomotive space, physical play space. This is very fluid, it's dynamic. Sometimes very unsustained though, so locomotive play starts high energy and then it tapers off and then it builds up again. Lots of strength games here. Of course, organized games have its own space close to the storage area perhaps. We have lots of quieter, smaller groups that interact on the periphery. So we've got groups out here near the staff room, and we've also got groups up by the fence here in the basketball area and tennis court area. And then we have kind of smaller groups, mainly girls, but some boy groups socializing, playing games, some strength games like gymnastics. So there does seem to be a degree of segregation around activities. And then finally, kind of next steps. Well, we've still got to kind of collect some of the methodology. So the first thing we'll do is begin to make tentative conclusions. And I've given a few of those away in this presentation. We'll work with ELT on that, as well as the campus development team. We need to continue the methodology. So at the moment, we've not done very much in the way of filming, and that's to observe the larger picture, the patterns of movement, the patterns of play. So we want to do that. And then we also need to embed some of the nature aspects of the study into ILTs. And from that, we'll make our analysis of observations, film and surveys, and we'll be able to feed back our findings after that. So I hope that's useful to you guys. And again, thanks to Melanie for giving us the sort of time to present.